Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to do a fun little video reacting to different power rankings that have been put forth by different members of the Overwatch community, Overwatch League community specifically. I believe I have 8 of them to go over, not including my own, which are the ones that you see right in front of you right now. So I will be going over the power rankings from FlatChat, Avril, Zoes, Packing 10, Halo of Thoughts, Ms. Liz or Liz Richardson, ATP, and then finally the competitive Overwatch aggregate power rankings that they have been doing. So they last were updated about 3 days ago as of me recording this video, so they may be a little inaccurate when this video actually comes out, but that's generally what it looks like. So what you see on the screen right now are my own power rankings, which even I would change these now based on things that have happened since I made them. But these are my own power rankings just to give you an idea of what mine look like, so it's easier to understand where I'm coming from when I am actually looking and talking about other people's power rankings. I know FlatChat did a thing talking about other people's power rankings. I wanted to do this video before that happened, so I feel a little bad that this is now happening after the fact. But let's jump in. Let's take a look first at the FlatChat power rankings. You can see them here. These are the ones I want to make note. These are the ones that are after the original ones. They did a little update because of the Philadelphia Fusion. They kind of put a little asterisk on the Fusion, and I know they were talking about moving them. I actually don't remember if this is them when they'd moved them or not. It doesn't look like they'd been moved at this point in time, even though they said they were going to move them. So that's always something real fun and interesting. That was a long little session they had when they were talking about changing their power rankings around. But, you know, it is what it is. So this is their power rankings here. There's some really interesting stuff on here. I think that they have Guangzhou at 14, which I think is very interesting. You know, I have Guangzhou at 9 on mine, which is definitely potentially something you could look at and have an issue with and think is a little high. But I have some faith in them. I think they have a good coaching staff, which is part of the reason why I put them as high as I did. The interesting one to me is Florida at 9. Avast was getting very upset about them having the Mayhem at 9. That seems low, especially having them in that spot. Now, I think it's interesting to put them at 9 when you look at who's around them, because I think the Mayhem are better than the Rain. But I would put Mayhem, I think I had them at 8 on mine. So, like, one spot lower. But they have them below the Rain, which I think is interesting. It's interesting because my top 7 is the exact same as their top 7. Not necessarily the same order. Pretty similar order. They have it Shock, Dragons, Gladiators, Justice, Fusion, Dynasty, Fuel. Mine is Shock, Dragons, Gladiators, Justice, Dynasty, Fuel. Or they have Fusion, Dynasty, Fuel. I have Dynasty, Fusion, Fuel. But obviously with the change to the roster with the Fusion going to Hotba and Toby instead of Poco and Funny Astro, I don't feel as good about the Fusion as I did. So it's interesting. That was the big thing they talked about. That they don't actually think, they don't feel as good about the Fusion roster now. They think they were going to drop them to like 7 or so. So it's interesting, but I actually think their power rankings are overall pretty good. A lot of similarities. You know, I have 20 through 17 the exact same. 20 through 16 I think I actually have the exact same. They have Guangzhou, then Toronto. So overall, I think a pretty good ranking. I agree with a lot of these FlatChat rankings. So I'll give this one a 9 out of 10. Very, very good. Very close to mine, so I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Next, we have Zoes here. Hers is not a 20-team power ranking. Hers is just regional-based, so this is hers. For her Western region, I think it looks overall pretty good. She has the Shock, the Gladiators, the Justice, same top 3 that I have. She then goes with the Atlanta Rain, followed by the Mayhem and the Fuel. So those are the next 3 that I have. Different order for them, however. I still really like the Fuel. I think the change to them, obviously losing Xe, definitely hurts them a lot. And so I don't feel as strongly about the Fuel as I did, but I still think they have a pretty good chance to do well. But I think hers is pretty recent. She put hers up yesterday, as of me recording this, or 2 days ago when you're watching this. So I think that the XC announcement had already happened at that point in time, so that may have been part of why she put them as low as she did. But the Rain that high, like I think the Rain are getting a lot of criticism where I don't think it's necessarily deserved. So I like that a lot. Mayhem, I think, are in a pretty good spot. And then you have Toronto, Boston, Houston, London, Paris, and Vancouver. So I think it's a pretty good Western region ranking overall. I actually agree with a lot of it. I have Boston over Toronto in mine, but with the loss of Soon, I would definitely put Toronto ahead of Boston now. So, yeah, pretty solid overall. Houston maybe also would be ahead of Boston now just because of the loss of Soon being pretty bad, and I think Houston actually might start the season pretty strongly. But overall, I think this is a good Western region one. East is very difficult to say for sure. Shanghai at 1, LA Valiant at 8. That's pretty common. Fusion Dynasty as your 2 and 3, pretty regular. New York at 4, very interesting. A lot of people kind of have differing opinions on the NYXL. Then Guangzhou, interesting. And then you have Hangzhou, Chengdu. I would put Chengdu ahead of Hangzhou personally, and probably Guangzhou as well. So I don't fully disagree with that, but I think there are some interesting ones there. I have too many questions about Hangzhou. I have too many problems with their big roster. I see it kind of failing and falling apart. So I don't necessarily agree with that one. So it's interesting. I think a lot of the teams in the East are hard to place. So I'll give this one an 8 because I think the Western one a lot of things in agreement, some differing, but a lot of things that I don't necessarily agree on. But then the East, there's just some ones some problems with here, but it's hard to place those, so understandable. But I will give Zoes an 8 out of 10. Next is Avril's power rankings, which wow, Avril's rankings are juicy rankings here. As you can see here on the side, he says Copium, couple things to remember, only indicative of preseason, my own personal opinion, and some scrimbucks. Don't mold too hard, it's just for fun, may not represent real match results, expect power levels to fluctuate. Right off the bat, LA Gladiators number 1 in NA. I'm really high on the Gladiators. I think they're really, really good. I don't think they're number 1 in NA. If they are certainly not number 1 in NA yet. They need to do some work, I think, before I think they're ready to be consistently ahead of the Shock. Shock at 2, obviously not a bad spot. Justice at 3, that's fine. I have a lot of difficulty saying that the Shaka 2 is a choice I agree with, but it is what it is. Now we start getting to the juicy stuff. Avril also has Atlanta at 4, much like Zoe did. But then he has the Houston Outlaws at 5, the Boston Uprising at 6, Dallas at 7, Florida at 8 in North America, then London, then Toronto, then Paris, and Vancouver. This is a spicy and juicy power ranking. Ooh, boy. Oh, my God. All right. All right. I like Houston a decent amount. I had them pretty low, but I think they're better than they look on paper in a lot of cases. They are not better than Florida. They might be better than Dallas to start the season because Dallas is not going to have XE, so they have to bring in another hit scan DPS, and that'll probably take some time. But I don't think they are the better team than Florida. That I do not think is the case. That is something special to see that. And I like Toronto more than I like London, even though I think London's actually pretty good. That is spicy. But Avril's APAC power rankings, I actually think are pretty good. I'm not going to lie. I actually think his APAC power rankings are not bad. He has Shanghai number 1, Seoul number 2. I agree with that. I think Seoul is... A lot of people criticize Seoul for being inconsistent last season, but I think one of the things that people point to is their regular season results. Seoul was a tournament team. They didn't care about the regular season. They cared about the May Melee. They cared about the Summer Showdown, the Countdown Cup. And Seoul showed up when they needed to show up in tournaments. Yeah, they only made 1 tournament finals, and I think people will look at that and be like, well, it doesn't mean a lot. Unless I guess they made 2 tournament finals because they also made the grand finals. But they were consistently good come tournament time. So I think that consistency won't really be as big of an issue. And then Shanghai, I think, is really good anyway. You have New York at 3. Interesting. I like New York. I think they're better than what people had originally thought, but I'm not as high as some people are. But I think putting them above Philadelphia right now is not a crazy take. Fusion are going to have to kind of rebuild some of that synergy that they were not scrimming with early in the season with the addition of Toby and Rascal and Hotba. I don't think Mono Hotba is a solid tank line. It did not work for New York last season. I don't think it'll work this season. Even in the Fusion system, the two of them just did not work well together, so I don't expect that to change. Then Chengdu, okay, all right, giving Chengdu some love, ahead of Guangzhou, ahead of Hangzhou. I definitely think they're better than Hangzhou right now, and I think there's definitely a case we made for them to be ahead of Guangzhou. So this is a good ranking here in APAC. I think the APAC ranking is good. The NA one is not as good. So I'll give this one a 7 because I really like the APAC ranking, and there's some stuff in NA I like, but I don't know about some of the stuff over here, especially once you get to like Houston down. It starts getting a little questionable. So I'll go with a 7 for this one. Next is Packing 10's rankings, which I actually think look pretty good for the most part. Top 3 are the same top 3 I have. I would put Shock above Shanghai personally, but I do think that's a solid top 3. Mayhem, Dynasty, Justice there is your next 6. Not a bad choice. Things have changed a lot since I made my own ranking. This is obviously, as you can see, from April 11th. So those I think would probably be your next 3. Maybe not in that exact order, but I would say that based on the changes we saw, we see Dallas lose Xe, we see the Fusion have to change a bunch of things. I would say the Mayhem, the Dynasty, and the Justice are your next best teams after those first 3. Then you start getting to the interesting stuff. You get into kind of the tier with the Spark, the Fuel, the Rain, the Fusion, the Charge, the Hunters, the Excelsior, the Defiant, and the Uprising. I don't fully disagree with this. I think this is a pretty interesting look at this one. I don't necessarily fully agree with where the teams are in this kind of placement, but I think that there's only one team that I think should be in that category, and maybe one team that shouldn't be in that category. I don't think Hangzhou should be that high, but I think you can make a case for them to be in this list, in this category. I think Houston should be in that category, and I think Boston maybe should drop out with the loss of Soon. I believe this was before Soon was released. May not have been before he was released, but I don't know if Boston should still be in that spot without Soon. I think that they lose a little bit of their strength with losing him, but I think they still have a lot of solid pieces, and I think they add one player, they'll probably be back in that area, but I definitely think Houston should be up there. And I also think London maybe could be up there. I think that you could make an argument that you really should just have 4 tiers instead of 5. You have the top 3, then you have the next 3, then you have everybody else, with the exception of Paris, the Valiant, and Vancouver. I also don't think that Vancouver is worse than the Valiant. Even if the Valiant has some more talented players, they also have players in off roles. So I agree with a lot of this one. I'll say this one, I will give it an 8. Because I have some places where I disagree, but overall I think it's a pretty solid ranking. So I'll give it an 8. Next is Halo of Thoughts. His are into 2 different ones. So the first one is his APAC ranking, which is like a normal style power ranking thing, but his other one is an article on juked.gg. So we'll take a look at that one next. I really like this one. Shanghai Seoul 1 and 2. I agree in a lot of that. He also has a very kind of key point here, which this is not taking the Fusion's visa issues into consideration. I think that you depends on how you do it. You kind of have to base it on what they do. I think the Fusion are probably in that 3rd or 4th spot without their visa issues. It really depends on what happens overall, but you can't also ignore the visa issues entirely. So if they can't get off to a good start, they're kind of screwed, because if they don't start well, they probably won't make the playoffs or a good playoff run. So I think them having these issues will help the likes of New York and Seoul and Chengdu, and obviously Hangzhou and Guangzhou as well, I think find more success early on, which is something that definitely works in their favor. Chengdu, Hangzhou, Guangzhou, I think that is a pretty solid 3 there to kind of wrap it up right before the Valiant. I think if you take the visa issues into consideration, I think you can drop the Fusion below Chengdu, possibly even below Hangzhou. I think they'd be around where Guangzhou is. in this list. My thoughts on Guangzhou fluctuate every day. I went from really high on them to I went from like not high on them at all to decently high on them to not high on them. Guangzhou's a weird team. They're a hard team to get a read on, but Fusion have a lot of problems with this tank line. They don't have any subs right now, so you're gonna have to run Carpe Rascal every match until you can get EQO and Shockwave over. So it's interesting. So I'll this one itself I'll give a 9. I won't give any of them a 10 yet because I don't fully agree with any of them. But this one's pretty close to a 10. His NA rankings. Let's take a look at them here. No, I don't care. I'm sorry, Juked. I don't care about this. So this is his NA rankings, and I believe it starts from the bottom. He has the Titans at 12. Okay, don't disagree there. Eternal at 11. All right. The Defiant at 10. Ooh, I do not agree with that. The Spitfire at 9. Okay. The Fuel at 8. All right, that's understandable. Houston at 7. Okay. Boston at 6. Ooh, I would not put Boston right now above Toronto or Dallas or even Houston. Wow. Mam at 5. Okay. Justice at 4. Rain at 3. Whoo! I was trying to say, who is this? Who is missing? And then the Gladiators 2 Shock at 1. This is spicy. I don't agree with the Rain at 3. I think they're good. I don't think they're 3 good. I think the Justice are better. I love the DPS line that the Rain have, but I can't put that tank line and that support line higher than the Justice. I can't put it higher than the Mayhem. This is an interesting one. I'm amazed at how low he has Dallas. I think this has to do with after Xy's retirement. So I think understandably so to kind of drop Dallas in some of these rankings when you lose a really important player. They already had a hole at their DPS line. Now it's even worse. Brings out some concerns, but I think it is an interesting spot to have them here. But this ranking, the NA ranking, I would say is probably like a 6. So you kind of take the average of that, the 9. So it's probably like I'll give this one a 7 overall between his two rankings. This one is juicy. This NA ranking is super, super juicy. All right, let's move on to Liz Richardson, Ms. Liz. Here is hers. She broke it down into 3 different ones. You have her overall, her west, and her east. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for making it so easy for everybody. For those of you who don't know who Ms. Liz is, she is a journalist and a reporter who does a lot of really great stuff. So I wanted to give her a shout out here because I think her work is really, really good. And I wanted to get some opinions of some players here. So it's always a good one. So here's hers. She has some notes. Rankings reflect mid to end the season after teams get their stuff together. She's high on Houston and will probably regret it. Guangzhou's rookies impressed her a lot. Seoul is good but inconsistent. Low placement doesn't mean bad team, means getting to finals is an uphill battle. And she doesn't know what the entire middle of APAC will look like, and nobody does. If they tell you, they're lying. I agree with that take. I'll just go through these ones first, and then I'll look at the overall. So this one, this was before, I think this was before the Xe move happened. She has a little tier listing here, but I think this is before the Xe move happened. So Dallas at 3. I wouldn't put Dallas at 3 even with Xe, but it is what it is. Houston at 4, above Washington and above Florida. I don't know about that. I think this is fine. Shock Gladiators top 2 are fine. This group here, I got some issues with. I don't think Toronto is worse than Paris or London. I don't necessarily think they're great, because I think they have some issues, but I don't think they're worse than Paris, and I don't think they're worse than London. I don't think Houston is better than Washington or Florida or even Atlanta. I think they're better than Boston. They might be better than Dallas now, but I don't think they're 4th overall. I know Liz is a Houston fan, so you know what? I'll give it a little bit of a pass because I felt like I put New York too high because I'm a New York fan, but you know, I'll give her a mild pass for that. The East is interesting. Like I said, she said hers is based on like when teams get their stuff together, so I understand having Philly in second. I don't think they are the second best. I still think Seoul is better, but I think they're a top three when they have their roster fully together. She's also very high on Guangzhou, a little bit higher than I am, which is interesting to see. I don't think they're that good, but I think that's an interesting spot. New York down here, then Hangzhou, Chengdu. I think you can flip those two a lot in a lot of cases. I think one of the issues with Chengdu, and I don't blame a lot of people for this. I think there's a lot of people who just aren't very familiar with the players of Chengdu, and they're therefore also not familiar with kind of trusting what they've done in the past, because they've done a lot of really questionable things, the Chengdu Hunters. So I understand why people are so low on them in a lot of cases, because I think it's difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads fully around how good they're going to be, because they, one, aren't used to the players that they brought in, and two, are so used to what they've done in the past. So I understand why some people put them super low. Hangzhou here, it is what it is. Not bad. So let's look at the combined one. Shock, Shanghai, Gladiators top three. That's the same top three I have. This is where I start. I already have issues here. Dallas is not the fourth best team in the Overwatch League. Washington is better. Florida's better. Seoul is better, I think. I don't think Dallas should be this high. Houston here also should not be this high. This is whatever. This group of five here is fine. I think in this order, you can definitely argue all of this order, but I think they should be higher than Dallas and Houston. New York, Atlanta, Hangzhou, okay, not bad. I don't think Toronto is the third worst team in the Overwatch League. That's kind of where I start to disagree. So there's bits of things here that I like, things here I dislike. I'd say this one is a 7 overall, because I don't agree. We have the same idea behind rankings. It's based on how she sees them doing, kind of, mid to end season. I look at it, kind of like a playoff thing. Here's her tier list. Look at it just to make it a little bit easier to see, right? Like easy finals, yeah, I agree. Good shot, I would agree for some of these. I wouldn't agree for Houston, and I wouldn't agree for Dallas right now, and I probably wouldn't agree for Fusion right now. I would put Seoul in that tier. Mid-range, I think those are pretty good. Uphill battle, yeah. Unproven, yeah, but I think Toronto is probably uphill battle, not unproven. And then I also think London's probably... No, I'd say London's probably uphill battle. I'd say the unprovens are just Paris and Vancouver. And then, yeah, retired main tank, no problem tier. Yep, that makes sense. Let's take a look now at ATP Overwatch's power rankings. I have a lot of... I remember I watched this video, and my reaction to some of these was, wow. Just starting from the top here, Shanghai at number 1. I don't agree with Shanghai number 1. I understand why people do. It's also important to kind of recognize ATP's direction with his power rankings. He did it based on where he thinks they will finish the season, the regular season, in terms of standings. I don't do my power rankings that way. I rank based on where I think teams will finish in terms of the playoffs. Like, I like to judge who do I think has the best shot at winning the championship. That's not how ATP did his. Completely understandable way to do it, so I don't take an issue with it. I agree on the top 4. I don't agree in the order. I would put the Gladiators above the Justice, and I would put the Shock above the Dragons. Fusion, Mayhem, Dallas, okay. I think I have a lot of the same teams. I have Seoul higher than that too, but okay. New York, he has New York at 8. I think that's a little high for New York, but understandable. I don't think Hangzhou is better than Seoul. I think Chengdu is better than Hangzhou, so I disagree there. Toronto, Boston makes sense. Guangzhou is, like 14? Okay, maybe. Atlanta is not 15th. I do not agree with that at all. Atlanta is way better than 15th, I think. Especially because they just added Unter as a coach, who I think is going to be a really good coach for this team, and he's going to bring a lot. London over Houston is what it is. I think Houston's better than that, but I've seen a lot of people put them there. I think Houston's stonks have been on the rise since this video came out. This video came out April 5th. It's one of the older ones I have on here. So I think since then, Houston's really kind of hit the stride. And this is also, this is before Xy's retirement. This is before the addition of Hotba and the addition of Toby to the Fusion. So it is interesting to see that. And then the bottom two, you know, I have Vancouver, Valiant, bottom 3 even. I've Paris that low as well. So I don't hate the bottom of this ranking, the bottom 3 and the top 4. I don't agree with the order, but I agree with the teams. But it's when you start getting into that mid range, once you get to like the NYXL down to Houston, I have a lot of problems with this one. I disagree with it a lot in that point. I'll leave a link in the description to all of the power rankings that I talk about, and also I'll leave a link to this video if you want to see it. Watch his entire reasoning. He gives his reasoning for every team, so it's a good video if you want to watch it. I would probably give this one like a 7 because I have a lot of problems with some of the placements on here. Even when you consider the fact that the way he's doing it is based on where he puts teams in terms of their regular season standings at the end of the season, I still would say that the way that it's done, not my favorite. So yeah, an interesting one, but not one I would say is my favorite. The final one here, now finally, is the competitive Overwatch Reddit aggregate rankings. So you could just, you know, you'd submit it and they would go through here. This is as of April 11th. This one's interesting. I think that it's got a little bit of juice on this one. I think when you look at what the general community sentiment is for a lot of these teams, you start to see where some of the things change for a number of these teams. So they have, for APAC, they have Shanghai 1, Seoul 2, Philly 3, New York 4, Hangzhou 5, Guangzhou 6, Chengdu 7, Valiant 8. I agree with the top 3. This is before all the fusion moves happened, so, you know, I think if you're considering fusion, if they're at their best, I think putting them at 3 is fine. New York at 4. I've seen a lot of New York at 4, so that's something that's happened over time. That's a more recent development. Hangzhou above Guangzhou and Chengdu is interesting. I think that, you know, Guangzhou is the real big mystery, I think. Depending on how good they are, I think that determines what APAC looks like. If they're the 7th team in APAC, I think we're going to... Some of these teams like Hangzhou and Chengdu are going to look really good in a lot of ways maybe that you wouldn't expect them to. But if Guangzhou is able to kind of be in that 4 to 5 range, I think you start to see a little more variability in APAC. So I think the community is doing a pretty good job with APAC, though. I don't think Chengdu should be 7, but I would expect nothing less from the Reddit community, who a lot of them have probably not watched Chinese Contenders. I haven't watched much Chinese Contenders, so honestly, I can't really blame them for that. When you get to the North American one, I don't disagree with much of this. I would put Dallas above Florida in my original one. Now I think it's probably Florida above Dallas because of the issues that Dallas are going to have now without XC. Then Atlanta, then Toronto, Boston, Houston. I'd drop Boston now. I'd put Houston up a little bit. London, Paris, Vancouver. I think this NA ranking is actually very good. I think the competitive Overwatch subreddit, understandably so, is a pretty good grasp on the North American scene, the North American teams. APAC, I think there's a little bit more variability, but overall I think it's pretty good. This one's probably an 8. I'd give this one an 8. I don't remember the rankings I gave to all of them, but I believe the highest I gave was to FlatChat. They got a 9, because I actually think theirs is pretty good. I think they actually hit a lot of them on the head, so... Best power ranking, in my opinion, is FlatChat. I agree with a lot of their takes. Reddit surprised me. Theirs is pretty good. Yeah. So those are the rankings that I have looked at. Let me know your thoughts on these in the comments down below. If there's a ranking you like that I didn't talk about, let me know which one it is. If you think that I'm very wrong in my take and opinions on these, and if you think one of the ones that I didn't like as much was better, let me know in the comments down below. But that's all from me. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, consider liking and subscribing for more like it in the future. But that is where I'm going to leave this one off. Thank you once again. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.